Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's GC Network Summit. I'm Joshua Frame. I'm National Chair of the Federal Youth Network, and thank you all for joining us here today. I'm joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people out of the National Capital Region. And I know that many of you are joining us from different places across Canada and different ancestral territories. So good to take a moment to think about that, and we'll put some links in the chat to confirm, so you can look at it and confirm, which ancestral territory you're joining us from if you're not already familiar with that. Alors, au fur et à mesure que nous progressons dans la session d'aujourd'hui, veuillez partager vos questions en utilisant le bouton questions et réponses qui est nommé Q&A dans la langue de votre choix. Alors, vous pouvez voter pour les questions que vous voulez poser en cliquant sur le bouton thumbs up. Malgré cette bouton n'est pas en français. So as we progress in today's session, please post your questions using the Q&A function in Zoom, and we will address those questions to the presenters at that time. And share your thoughts using the chat function, and engage with us throughout the session to let us know if you would like to know more about a particular topic, or if there's any additional information you need from us. Cette séance est en français et en anglais, alors c'est une séance bilingue, et puis les présentations vont être en anglais et en français, et on a les diapos dans les deux langues officielles. So the presentations from today will all be posted to our GC Wiki following the session in both official languages. And presenters will do their best to have either English or French or both on screen as they're going through their presentations. But without further ado, our Deputy Minister Champion for the Federal Youth Network is on with us. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to opening remarks from Christiane Fox, Deputy Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. And since 2018, we've been honored to have Christiane as our Deputy Minister Champion for the Federal Youth Network. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Josh. It's really nice to see you. And thank you for the invitation to join here today. And it actually has been my absolute pleasure to be the DM champion of the Federal Youth Network for the last few years. It is a very important part of my responsibilities and a part I enjoy a lot. Alors, comme Josh a mentionné, mon nom est Christiane Fox. Je suis la sous-ministre d'Immigration, Réfugiés et Citoyenneté Canada. Je me suis joint au ministère cet été, au mois de juillet 2022. Donc, je continue à apprendre dans mes nouvelles fonctions. Et puis, comme a mentionné Josh, depuis 2018, j'ai le plaisir d'être la sous-ministre championne du Réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires fédéraux. I first would like to acknowledge that the land on which I am joining you from is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be present on this territory. Alors, bienvenue au sommet des réseaux du gouvernement du Canada. Dans la fonction publique fédérale, les réseaux remplissent des fonctions essentielles au sein des ministères et des agences. Il relie vraiment les collègues en créant un sentiment unique d'unité et d'objectif. Puis, il favorise un sentiment de communauté chez leurs membres et permettent la collaboration entre les niveaux, les régions et les ministères. So welcome to the Government of Canada's Network Summit. In the Federal Public Service, I have to say networks perform a critical function within departments and agencies. They really do connect colleagues and workers together, teams together, and it creates a really unique sense of unity and purpose for our employees. And I think that it really makes a difference in different levels within an organization, regions, and across departments. In a way, they really engage new public servants to advance really core issues that really matter to employees, to management, and to leadership in terms of equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. GC networks really do it all in that context. And I have to say, and I say this a lot, and I honestly believe it, as a deputy, when I take part in these conversations, I learn every single time I participate. Your ideas, your passions, your suggestions, and even at times your criticisms about how we do our work definitely drive me to be to be motivated to create better workplaces, to do better, to make change. And I think the only way that we will improve as a public service to be that employer that people are gravitate to is if we use our networks, listen to our networks, and implement change and action. So as network leads today, you will learn about some best practices you can employ to help you connect with your members. And that's important because that connection is part of, building a team, building a group of people to get you to that objective, to make change, to develop a proposal, to create an event. And there are so many tools that we have that you can use: podcasting, micro missions, events like this, conversations. I just think, these types of events can really open up your ideas around what you can do in your own capacity. Alors, si ça s'agit d'engager de nouveaux fonctionnaires ou de faire progresser des questions liées à l'équité, la diversité, à l'inclusion, la lutte contre le racisme, les réseaux peuvent vraiment tout faire. Alors, en tant que responsable des réseaux, vous allez découvrir aujourd'hui plein d'idées, plein de bonnes pratiques exemplaires que vous pouvez employer au sein de vos ministères, au sein de vos conseils. Alors, vraiment, là, prenez le temps d'écouter puis d'apprendre. Ça vaut vraiment la peine. I'm very encouraged to see how the GC Network Summit has emerged, and I'm sure the sessions, discussions, all the connections you've made today will really bring value to your role. And it really is kind of a start of a relationship, a start of exchanging information, and that you can really take it back as you conclude on the day. And, I say this a lot, and I'm sure you hear this a lot. But the pandemic has absolutely, completely changed how we work as a public service. And it's been, there's been so much tension, right, over the last 2-3 years as we moved from, regular operations to facing a global pandemic and all working from home. And now people are at different, spots in terms of hybrid workspaces and different ways to collaborate. But the networks actually throughout the pandemic have been probably the most innovative that we've learned from departments, really, to take those best practices and take those ideas. And if I look at what the Federal Youth Network did to kind of bring people together during that time, it was amazing. And then I think that we need to kind of continue that and challenge ourselves to do better and to keep being innovative and seeing what's out there to help these types of conversations and frankly, just to help us learn. So I really want to thank you all for being here, for being open to sharing your ideas, your perspectives, and some of the challenges that you face. And I think that we wouldn't be the public service we are without these types of conversations. And I think that it's about making change now, but it's also about how do we influence that next generation of recruits. And to me, that's a big focal point because we have to think about how do we recruit and retain talent. And how do we recruit and retain talent that is diverse and that represents Canada? And I don't think we're there yet. So the things that you'll be sort of discussing today, I think will help us all. Alors, merci. Je peux pas le dire assez. Le temps que vous avez pris aujourd'hui pour partager vos perspectives, vos idées, vos défis, ça va beaucoup nous aider à vraiment à soutenir la fonction publique qu'on veut créer pour maintenant, mais aussi dans l'avenir. So thank you all. I look forward to hopefully meeting you all soon, maybe in person, maybe in another event like this, but I appreciate the opportunity to welcome me to this session. So Josh, with that, I will turn it back to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris. Okay, so thank you very much, Christian Fox, for your opening remarks and for being a champion and truly a ambassador for change and development in the public service, and we very much appreciate all that you do to help and assist and guide. And thanks very much for joining us today. With that, I will hand it off to Ella, who will be our moderator for today's summit. So Ella has been a frequent collaborator of ours over the years, and very pleased to have you here today to moderate. So over to you, Ella.
Thanks, Josh. And thank you, DM Fox, for your comments and for your continued support of the Federal Youth Network. We couldn't be as engaging without your leadership. Hi, everyone. My name is Ella Idache, and I will be the moderator of the summit. I work for TBS as the communications advisor, and I am also a volunteer for the Federal Youth Network. First, we would like to welcome Neha Shahzad and Sean Karmali, who are from the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network. Neha and Sean host a wonderful podcast, which was recently highlighted in the 29th annual report to the Prime Minister on the Public Service of Canada. So Sean and Neha, floor is yours.
Thank you, Ella. Really nice to be here and nice to have heard the opening message from Deputy Minister Fox. So who are we? I will introduce myself. My name is Sean Karmali. I am a co-podcast host with my colleague Neha Shahzad, and we represent the co-hosts currently for the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network, which, to be quite honest, the Iran network, or the ARAN network, we like to call it Iran, it all started with a tweet. And that tweet happened in June of 2020, when there was a lot going on, not only just with the pandemic, but with the killings of Black, Indigenous, and racialized people in the United States and in Canada. And it was really born out of a will to meaningfully change the way things are done, the way justice is pursued. So Iran is a grassroots volunteer network of public servants across jurisdictions in Canada. And that tweet that I just mentioned to you was really a tweet about building conversation and mobilizing networks, precisely what the Deputy Minister mentioned. So networks have really been this encouraging tool over the last couple of years at least. So I guess we can move on to the slide that talks about what is the network. Thank you. So this story, so moving to the next slide, it's to do with what we aim to do. I'm going to actually pass that over to my colleague Neha, who will speak a little bit about this part.
Thanks, Sean. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm Neha Shahzad. I am a senior policy analyst at NRCan, but as Sean mentioned, I'm also a co-host for Ideanomics, which is our podcast. But to tell you a little bit about Iran, our main aim is to fill a gap that we found in federal employee networks, which was to take a convener role where we amplify and support existing work that's done by other equity networks and act as a community mobilizer. So as all networks do, we do our best to create a safe space for public servants, but not just federally. We try to go across provincial, territorial, and municipal governments as well to just share knowledge, take action against systemic racism, and we do our best to support our members in taking that practical action to enhance equity, diversity, and inclusion within their workplaces. Next slide, please. So one of those practical actions that I was talking about is our podcast. If you go to the next slide. And the reason that we started doing the podcast is we found that we needed something that would allow for cross collaboration. So something that would reach across departments and something that would easily share the conversations that we're having with those departments. So we've had discussions with people at NRCan, at FAC, we've had discussions with people at CERNAC. We had one just with DM Quan Watson just yesterday, so that is coming soon, stay tuned. And also with counselors. So we get a variety of different guests and different hosts, and it allows for a little bit of that cross collaboration. But it also allows for us to share complex information that we won't be able to get like in a website or in a social media post. It's some of these topics that we talk about are more complicated than just a few single lines, and they're more about the conversation. And the last reason that we wanted to do this was to create on-demand content. So things that were relevant to public servants today. So we've had discussions on mental health, about the future of work, just about things that public servants are facing today and in the near future. Next slide, please. So I'll turn it over to Sean.
Thank you, Neha. And so at the outset, I mentioned that really it's really a team effort to get these podcasts off the ground. You know, it takes time, it takes effort to put into the questions. Not all the questions are different. Sorry, not all the questions are the same. They're usually tailored, and a lot of our discussion is organic. And so that's the key element that we also want to mention, is that if you're thinking about the podcast idea, that being organic is really a good way to sort of move forward with that. So with this slide, I'm just going to also mention and highlight Marcela Popowich, who does our editing for the for our podcasts, and it takes, again, a lot of time to put that together. And it's been great just assembling them and working together. And as Neha mentioned, we have had a number of guests so far, and please stay tuned for some more that are going to be coming out in November, some podcasts. And yeah, so we are on a few platforms. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the presentation. Next slide, please.
So the tool that we use to record our podcast is called Anchor.fm. It's a free online software where you can record and edit your podcasts. But the way that we do it is we record our podcasts over Zoom, and then we upload and edit there. We do find it's really user-friendly, very easy to use. And it also provides a bit of data and analytics as to how your podcast is performing, like how each episode is performing, how many people are listening, how many unique views are you getting. And this is particularly good, especially when we have it on so many different platforms. So Anchor.fm allows you to host on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, essentially anywhere that you can get your podcast. So we love it for that reason. Oh, we're going to stay here. Yeah. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so in terms of who to contact, we recommend finding contacts within your own network and sort of building off of that. There's no place to go any further than to really look at the circle of that you're in, and really asking open questions, like, do you know this person, or can you put me in touch with this person? Or do you have any interesting people who could talk about this topic? And building off of that is usually a nice way to do that. In terms of building rapport, what we try and do, Neha and I and Marcela, is we try to have a pre-meeting with our guests, so that before we go live, our guests are fully, aware of who we are. Ultimately, we want to make them feel comfortable, and also to listen to what they can speak to. So taking notes while we're in the pre-meeting, having them really understand where we're coming from too. So, the pre-meeting also serves as just sharing reactions. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we can connect on different points. And so it really lets the recorded podcast, when it comes to that, to have a little bit more of that comfort. We've had conversations in our podcasts that were that had touched on a number of topics, such as healing and trauma. And so I can recall a guest, mentioning, you feel healing in your body, and you sort of react to things, but we wouldn't have probably gotten to sort of that kind of essence had we not had a pre-meeting. And so we do recommend pre-meetings before you engage in recording. And now we will move to communications, promotion, and advertising.
So I also run the communications portfolio at Aran. And again, that's another team effort, but specifically for the podcast, what we try to do is highlight a couple of quotes that we really enjoyed within the podcast from our guest. And we make just like a little thumbnail on Canva. We use Canva to do all of our visuals. And then we post that maybe twice a week up on our Twitter. Or our LinkedIn. And we find that really drives a little bit of engagement towards the podcast, rather than just releasing the link one time and then moving on to the next thing. It allows people who haven't listened to the podcast just now the ability to get little snippets without necessarily having the time to invest in the entire podcast. And for our comms, we do use Hootsuite. So again, Hootsuite is another software that's free up to a certain degree, and it allows you to link different platforms. So we use it to connect our Twitter and LinkedIn. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we're you're really at the end of our presentation here, and we want to let you know that you can certainly reach out to us, and there are a number of ways that you can do that. One is to subscribe using our distribution list. So there's an email there in that hyperlink to access that. We're also on GC Collab. We have a space there for our network, and we're also on Twitter. So please check us out, at us. Please feel free to tweet and just reach out and say hello. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, you can also email us at the email listed there. Yeah, so that's pretty much where we are. If there are any questions, feel free to let us know. I think we do have a couple of questions in the chat, but I'll let the facilitator, if you want to help out with this, because I can't see the full screen.
Yes, we will be going through the questions after all the presentations during the Q&A.
Thank you, Ella.
No worries. Thank you, Sean and Neha. The links to your podcast have been dropped in the chat. You've both interviewed some amazing guests, and I hope everyone gets a chance to listen. I know I will be doing so. Our next guests for the tech showcase will be Tamara and Vincent, who will talk about a platform I'm very familiar with, GC Exchange, a file I have been working on, fortunate enough to work on for over the last year and a half. So Tamara, Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ella. Can I get somebody to acknowledge whether you can hear me or not?
Can hear you. All good.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Hello, and thank you very much for having us present to the GC Network Summit. Thanks for Arent as well for the presentation. It's great to see, and I saw the questions in the chat about Arent being on GC Exchange. They are on GC Exchange, so I didn't pop it into the chat yet, but I'm sure somebody will be able to do that at a later time. Wanted to, Tamara and myself, my counterpart, will be giving a brief overview of GC Exchange. We are part of the GC Exchange team and want to introduce you to, the whole theme about this is collaboration, breaking down silos. And while GC Exchange is the basically next generation of communication collaborative, it's a platform basically that you have at your disposal as federal employees. Other people mentioned, GC Collab, GC Connects. Those are other platforms that are a little bit older and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. However, GC Exchange is the newest and freshest one, and you'll see in just a moment how easy it is to join and what the benefits are to actually joining. I will now be switching to French. Je m'appelle Vincent et je suis ici avec mon collègue Tamara pour donner un bref aperçu de GC Échange. Nous souhaitons vous présenter la nouvelle génération de communication et de collaboration, et c'est à l'échelle du gouvernement du Canada. GC Échange est une plateforme pas gouvernementale qui permet aux fonctionnaires de collaborer à partir d'un seul endroit. Et c'est entre les organismes et les ministères et d'échanger des nouvelles, des renseignements et des annonces. La plateforme repose sur la technologie Microsoft 365, y compris Teams et SharePoint. Donc, c'est des technologies que vous connaissez déjà. GC Échange est conçu pour être bilingue et accessible. La plateforme appuie l'utilisation d'outils d'accessibilité comme les lecteurs d'écran et les logiciels de dictée, et elle est accessible dans les deux langues officielles. Pour l'instant, GC Échange ne peut être utilisé que pour des renseignements non classifiés, mais nous travaillons à créer un espace pour des renseignements protégés A et B pour l'avenir. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Donc, pour commencer à utiliser la plateforme, vous devez d'abord vous inscrire. Donc, l'inscription, c'est vraiment facile. J'ai mis le lien dans le chat. Vous accédez d'abord au site sur cette diapositive et c'est vraiment à 2 étapes, vraiment facile. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Il y a juste simplement à choisir votre langue de préférence et entrer votre courriel gouvernemental. L'inscription ne prend que quelques instants. Je le fais tout le temps pour d'autres utilisateurs qui éprouvent des difficultés. Et c'est vraiment facile. C'est l'inscription la plus facile, je pense, dans le gouvernement présentement. Et la bonne affaire, c'est que aussitôt que vous êtes inscrit, il n'y a pas vraiment de mot de passe, il n'y a rien à vraiment vous connecter. Et c'est vraiment, ça prend comme même pas 5 minutes. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Donc, après votre inscription, vous devriez recevoir un courriel conformément à votre inscription. Cependant, si vous avez besoin d'assistance, l'équipe GC Échange est là pour vous aider. Nos courriels sont sur cette diapositive et je l'ai déjà entré dans le chat. N'hésitez pas à nous contacter pour tout besoin technique et pour l'intégration. Prochaine diapositive, s'il vous plaît. Donc, présentement, il y a plus de 100 ministères qui sont déjà préapprouvés pour s'inscrire à la plateforme. Au-delà de 20 000 utilisateurs sont déjà enregistrés. Des milliers accèdent déjà au site quotidiennement. Il y a tellement de choses que vous pouvez faire sur GC Échange et je vais juste, en bref, donner quelques bénéfices. Donc, le premier bénéfice, c'est la création d'espaces communautaires sur GC Échange. Est vraiment simple et tient à éliminer les obstacles à la collaboration et d'échange d'informations. Donc, vous pouvez vraiment, comme on dit en anglais, reach out and touch someone sur la plateforme. Vous pouvez vraiment, à l'échelle du gouvernement total, vraiment collaborer avec tout le monde. Vous pouvez lire des nouvelles et des histoires au sein de la fonction publique. Vous pouvez dire à vos amis de travail de se joindre à vous sur GC Échange. Donc, s'ils sont dans différents ministères, vous pouvez, une fois que vous êtes tous inscrits, vous pouvez commencer à travailler ensemble comme si vous faisiez partie du même ministère. C'est aussi en utilisant votre compte GC Échange dans MS Teams pour clavarder et transmettre des documents. Aucun de mots de passe à mémoriser puisque votre compte est relié à votre identité cloud. Et il y a la possibilité de créer des pages pour l'entièreté de la fonction publique, entre autres ARAN a été conçu sur cette page-là. Il n'y a pas besoin d'avoir des compétences dans le codage, c'est tout fait à partir de WebPart, vraiment facile à utiliser et à apprendre. Et comme vous créez des pages sur le site, vous pouvez, si vous êtes propriétaire, vous pouvez ajouter ça dans votre portfolio, vous pouvez ajouter ça dans votre CV comme quelque chose que vous avez fait dans le gouvernement. Je vais maintenant changer en anglais. So a few of the benefits of GC Exchange, and I wanted to do this in French and in English, is that there are, it's really easy to actually create spaces. It's a platform where it's intended to break down silos and barriers. You can read news and stories from across the public service. You can collaborate with other departments and employees through MS Teams and SharePoint. You can stay connected with employees from other departments and with former colleagues. So if you're moving around in different departments, you can actually stay in touch quite easily. There's no pesky passwords to remember. It's tied directly to your cloud identity. Creating pages that reach across the public service. No coding knowledge is required to actually do this stuff. And you have the page that you've created in your portfolio. So this is something, anybody who creates pages and promotes, is doing some networking on there, you can add that to your CV and as a demonstration of what you've actually done in government. Thanks once again for letting me speak on behalf of the GC Exchange team. I will now pass the baton over to my colleague, Tamara, to speak further on the platform. Tamara?
Thank you. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So can we have the next slide, please, to talk about GC Exchange, the lifeblood of GC Exchange, which is the communities, or in French, les collectivités. Essentially, GC Exchange allows you to create communities across departments. So you can create communities about such an IT project management, or for things like having mutual interests in HR or translation or editing or communications. You can also create communities with respect to diversity inclusion, such as, for example, the anti-racism is on GC Exchange, as are inclusions such as the Black Employees Network, the Knowledge Circle for Indigenous Inclusion, the Muslim Employees Network, and others. You can also create communities for something like carpooling. Somebody has created a community like that to make sure to bring together carpooling groups in the National Capital Region. Essentially, all you need to create a community are 2 owners, so that if one of you goes on vacation or moves to another department or decides they don't want to do this anymore, there is still someone in charge. And you can always make more owners. You can make all your members owners if you want. And your description in English and French, and a business reason in language of your choice to explain why you need an interdepartmental community. The benefits that a community gets are, next slide, please. So essentially, you get Microsoft Teams and SharePoint tied into one. On Microsoft Teams, you and your community members can chat about the issues that concern you. You can work together on files, such as creating an interdepartmental briefing note together without needing to email it across to each other. You can create a wiki or a project planner, or just to share information. On the SharePoint side, you are able to create a website that is visible to everyone on GC Exchange, so hopefully everyone in the public service, showing what your community is about. So there you can share news, you can post about your accomplishments, you can profile important members, you can link to your YouTube or Twitter or Instagram, and you can also even add documents. So for example, if you want to have a playbook for what all public servants should know about IT security, you can put that there to be easily downloadable. And the communities can link together into communities of communities. Next slide, please. Thematic hubs. Right now we have one thematic hub going, the Diversity and Inclusion Thematic Hub, and I'd really like to draw attention to Ella Adach's work, who is our moderator here, but who has been instrumental in creating and designing this thematic hub, and it looks absolutely beautiful. The Anti-Racism Network is on it as well. It allows members of those communities that have a mutual interest to talk to each other, to share events, to share articles, and to basically put together their heads and see what can come out. We have several other hubs in the works, such as a data hub for data-focused communities from fisheries and oceans to talk to data-focused communities in the IRCC and to data-focused communities in Heritage Canada and across the public service, or an HR-focused thematic hub, or possibly one focused for editors and translators. We are looking forward to essentially the goal of GC Exchange is to break down silos that have been created by public service departments, and to allow public servants to truly work together and see what comes out, because who knows what may come out of sparking or bringing people together, maybe it's an amazing innovation, or be it just a wonderful friendship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent and Tamara. And be sure to register for GC Exchange if you haven't already. I'm sure the link will be dropped in the chat shortly. The next section will highlight ways you can sustain your network. We have Ali Khan, who is the Diversity Inclusion Lead for the Federal Youth Network, and also the co-founder of the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network. So Ali, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ella. I really appreciate it. Good day, everybody. My name is Ali. I'm coming to you live from the region of Peel, which is part of the Treaty Lands and Territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the home of the Anishtabeg, the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, the Ojibwe, and the Métis people. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to speak a little bit about employee networks. Grassroots networks, they play a critical function in increasing the engagement that we have in the public service. They are uniquely positioned to create safe spaces in large bureaucratic institutions like ours, and they allow for diverse cross-sections of employees to come together, to bring their authentic selves to work. They have numerous benefits, and I'll name a few of them. They allow folks to kind of build connections based on shared characteristics. They improve employee retention at the organizational level by creating safe spaces where employees can connect with folks who have similar lived experiences, which may be rare in certain workplaces. They help new employees feel welcome. They create bonds with colleagues. They create spaces for what we know as intrinsic motivators to flourish. For example, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, which are some of the findings of self-determination theory. There's a lot of studies behind how these traits are those that lead people to be intrinsically motivated, and so networks really support folks and their ability to do that. And lastly, they support governmental priorities related to diversity, to inclusion, and overall to employee engagement as well. I would say out of all of these, the two most important traits I find from employee networks are they create a sense of belonging and of meaning and of purpose by, again, connecting like-minded people with each other across bureaucratic silos, which greatly improves employee well-being and mental health. And the second point I'd like to make is they allow employees also to work on large, meaningful projects outside of their immediate workplaces, thereby gaining immense transferable skills that can last a lifetime and that can be used to leverage their career development opportunities as well. That's critical for employees working in the regions or in administrative positions where they may not be able to receive those opportunities in comparison to folks in the NCR. For these reasons, it's critical, in my opinion, for folks who do have the agency to strongly consider joining both departmental and interdepartmental networks. And importantly, if one finds that there isn't a network for an area that they're interested in, they should strongly consider being the creator of one. We are going to come across several folks today who took that step and were the change that they wish to see by creating networks where there weren't any in the past. To that point, if somebody's interested, and I know we have a lot of leads of networks here, but if someone's is actually interested in creating a new network, one of the ways they can kind of go about doing that is to create a presence on one of the GC tools. Of course, GC Exchange would be a great one in which to do that. Folks can also use GC Collab or GC Connects depending on their unique needs. But make a landing spot for that network. And then consider creating a one-page email that is bilingual, that speaks to what the network is, why it exists, and how folks can kind of go about joining it. And then that one-pager should have a link to the landing spot of that network. You could then take that one-pager and send it out to other like-minded networks to kind of cross-promote the initiative that you're working on. You could send it to various GC newsletters. And you can also promote it using the GC tool. So those are ways to kind of promote an initiative from the bottom up. But folks can also take a top-down approach by promoting their initiative through senior leader tables, for example, where the heads of HR sit, and they can have these senior leaders kind of push the information related to their network down. And this kind of creates a robust way of advertising the initiative and kind of spreading awareness and knowledge about the fact that there's a new network. Now, in order to help support the networks, both existing and potentially the new ones, we've created something called a network toolbox. And that's what you see on screen today. It's on our GC Wiki, and there's a link for that in the chat, I'm sure. This is a grassroots employee-driven initiative, things Finn is famous for. And here folks can kind of come together and find the resources they need to kind of build or sustain their networks. This is an evergreen website, and we encourage all of you who are on the call today and folks that will be listening in later on or viewing later on to consider sending us any documents they have, any resources they have that have helped their particular network, and we can add them to this evergreen list so that in the future, if somebody's looking for information on how to create a terms of reference, on how to promote their events and so forth, they can just go to this one centralized location and they'll have everything they need. Now, with the network toolkit, I just want to provide some, some brief information here. There's a section on building one's network, and that has information on how to create a virtual toolkit, how to create a virtual team charter. There's also an example of, as I said, a terms of reference, which can be used for new and emerging networks. The second section, it pertains to how to host events. You can find information here on how to make your documents accessible, how to host in-person mixers, which we're seeing a lot of, and which Finn will be hosting in the coming weeks, and there'll be some links on that shortly as well. And you'll also find information on how to run podcasts, like the Aaron team described earlier, how to hold speed mentorship sessions, how to create scenario notes. There's a wealth of information in that section as well. Subsequent to that, you'll find a list of GC communities. So GC Communities was created by Jeff Outram. So big shout out to Jeff. And he also, we were able to get a lot of great resources from him for the creation of this toolkit. So I want to applaud him for his longstanding efforts in employee engagement. GC Communities has a list of all the different networks that are, or a lot of the different networks that are active right now in the GC. And there's also information on communities of practice. Aside from that, there's another link for GC diversity networks. These are departmental and interdepartmental groups that are associated with answering the clerk's call to action on equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. So they deal with a lot of EDI work, a lot of reconciliation work. And these are places where you can find and house information related to your respective networks. Going quickly here, the next section, that kind of pertains to information on online collaboration tools that folks can use to kind of build their networks. There's information on GC tools, on GC Exchange. There's information on SlideShare that folks can use for hosting virtual and in-person events as well. And the last section outlines social media events, collaboration tools, places where you can kind of promote your events, house your events. And lastly, there's some information on various Facebook groups. Right now, there's a lot of activity on social media related to GC networks. You'll see things on LinkedIn, you'll see things on Reddit, and on Facebook. There's a lot of groups that have a lot of specialized individuals in various fields. So those are places where you can kind of promote your events, kind of describe what's happening with your respective networks. So I'll leave it there. There's a lot of information, but I encourage folks, if you take one thing away from this presentation, just send us your resources. You have the contact information for the Federal Youth Network in the chat, and you can find it on GC Wiki. Let us know if we are missing anything, and we'd be happy to continue growing this with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ali. That was great. Next up is someone you all know, Josh Frame, and he will be speaking about a great hiring tool that you can use to find support for your network. Josh, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ella. So I'll just be speaking relatively briefly about micromissions. To start off, micromissions were a pretty sort of new idea back in sort of 2016-ish. It's kind of a different way to provide kind of support for a shorter term project, potentially, or to be able to provide support for an area where there wasn't any salary funding necessarily to support that. So it's an opportunity for employees to demonstrate their knowledge and their skills, for managers to find help for a project. So these are informal staffing mechanisms. They involve no salary funding exchange, and that's like one of the core tenets of a micromission. It could be based on an email with your manager, between the host manager and your substantive manager. It could be based on an agreement, and it's relatively open in terms of whether the assignment is full-time or part-time for a few weeks or a few months. some of the examples of how people have used micromissions in the past. So the national managers community, for example, has used it back in the pre-pandemic times when they were delivering in-person conferences across Canada. So they would seek out micromissions to provide some support for those in-person deliveries of those events in the weeks leading up to a particular conference and in a particular city. So if you're working in Toronto, you might be solicited to do a micro mission to support a Toronto delivery that was happening at the time. Et pour le réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires fédéraux, on a utilisé les micro-missions pour les diverses possibilités. Alors, en 2020, quand on a commencé, juste avant la pandémie, quand on a commencé à voir comment on pourrait avoir le conférence du camp de carrière 2020, on planifiait cette conférence en personne et puis on avait, je pense, 14 villes pour cette conférence. Alors, on a eu des personnes qui commençaient des micro-missions pour cette tâche. So for the Federal Youth Network, we've used micro-missions in the past to bring people on to support what was supposed to be an in-person conference in 2020. And then we sort of pivoted those resources to other functions. So in that case, we were bringing people on board similar to my example of the national managers community to support our in-person deliveries. So people in St. John's to support an in-person conference, people in Vancouver to support an in-person conference, and really across Canada. So that was an example of a use of full-time micromission. In the end, we ended up pivoting those resources to help us support the launch of the virtual learning series, which has continued over these past 2.5 years. Mais pour les micromissions, alors vraiment c'est informel. Pour cet exemple, avec notre réseau, on a utilisé les formulaires pour avoir une entente entre le gestionnaire responsable pour le poste et puis nous comme les gestionnaires hôtes. So we used sort of a more formal agreement for those micromissions at the time. They spelled out the key responsibilities, the time period of the agreement, and were signed off on by myself and the substantive manager of each of those employees. Next slide, please. So why are we talking about this right now? So in our discussions with a lot of your networks, this topic came up in terms of micromissions, how it can be used by your networks, which may or may not have any formal resources behind it, in terms of any salary funding or any O&M funding that you can tap into. So it's important because micromissions are a cost-free resource. There is no salary exchanged. There is no funding required really to support a micromission. It's really based on the value proposition that you can make to those organizations of what the candidate will get out of it, what the organization that is paying that salary will get out of this micromission. For some of your networks, this might be able to provide some short-term support if you're doing sort of a major event or a major program or a conference, and you might be able to bring people on cost-free for a short period of time. In a different sense, this might be able to support your work within your networks. So if you're feeling some level of pushback from your manager, your director, or management within your organization, formalizing a micromission that spells out the time commitment for that role, the length of time for that commitment might help you get some support for that role you have already within your networks. Alors, c'est une ressource gratuite. Et c'est vraiment basé sur les propositions de valeur pour les candidats et les organisations. Il n'y a aucun dollar de salaire qui est échangé entre les organisations. Et puis, c'est une méthode à court terme pour les grands projets, pour les conférences, pour vraiment n'importe quoi. Et ça peut formaliser votre travail avec vos réseaux. So we will share resources about micromissions on the page following our conference or our session here today. But there are a number of examples, there are a number of blogs, if you search for micromissions in Government of Canada, of how people have used micromissions in pre-pandemic times. People use them to support the innovation fairs that happened across Canada. And we used it as a network. The national managers community used it as a network. Many of the networks and communities within the GC have put these to good use. And really, it doesn't necessarily need to be around an event or a conference. It could simply be you don't have that capability within your own team to support something you're trying to do. For example, you're trying to learn how to launch a podcast. You might need some support for that. You might have a 10-hour-a-week micromission for 6 weeks or 8 weeks to support that function and get that off the ground. But really, the possibilities are unlimited. And it really is about making that value proposition in order to get the support of candidates and organizations. Alors, merci beaucoup pour votre attention, pour discuter les micro-missions. Et puis, j'espère que c'est un outil que vous pouvez utiliser pour vos réseaux. So I hope that you'll make use of this tool and really be able to sort of strengthen some of your networks using a slightly more formal use of a micromission to get some resources in place. But also happy to chat with you after and address any questions that you have later on as well. So back to you, Ella. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for that informative presentation, Josh. Up next, we will have Jacqueline Lalonde, representing the Regional Federal Councils. This group greatly supports the flow of information and ideas amongst departments in the regions. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be here today. I've learned a lot already, and we're not even, I guess we're about halfway through now, the schedule. Just to step back a little bit and mention about Josh's micromissions, we've often taken the opportunity to have excellent candidates come in and help us out on our projects. And so I encourage everyone that has an opportunity. It's a nice opportunity for a stretch experience, or to just go and do something that you're very passionate about. So if you can, definitely take advantage of those. I'm actually here to talk to you about the Regional Federal Councils. I would not be surprised if many of you have not heard about us before, as we have a fairly narrow target audience and mandate. But I hope that you will have a better understanding of who we are and what we do in a few minutes. My colleague, Paul Keller, is also on the line, and we're really happy to share a bit of information on the RFCs. Next slide, please. So as Ella mentioned, I'm Jacqueline Lalonde. I've been with the Government of Canada for about 20 years now and have worked in a number of jobs and opportunities. J'ai eu le plaisir de connaître des expériences intéressantes et enrichissantes que travailler avec des communautés francophones en milieu minoritaire à travers le Canada, organiser des conférences pour des groupes de 10 à 5 000 personnes, participer à des séances d'engagement avec des communautés autochtones pour un projet de construction d'un centre de recherche dans le nord du Canada. Et en ce moment, j'ai le plaisir d'appuyer le travail de l'Agence canadienne de développement économique du Nord, ou CanNor, plus couramment connu, et le Conseil fédéral du Nord et les conseils fédéraux à travers le Canada, ce qui m'apporte ici aujourd'hui. Prochaine diapo. People are often surprised to learn that there are more employees across the regions than there are in the NCR. It's therefore important that we have a mechanism in place to transfer national visions, policies, and directives to the regions, while also ensuring that the center takes regional realities into account while setting policies and guidelines. Next slide, please. Il y a 7 grandes régions fédérales au Canada, y compris la région de la capitale nationale, où se trouve le siège social de nombreux ministères et nombreuses agences. La plupart des organismes fédéraux opérant dans une région donnée ont un cadre supérieur qui supervise les opérations et tient compte des perspectives de leur région lors de l'application des politiques ou des programmes nationaux. Les conseils fédéraux régionaux jouent un rôle important dans les provinces et territoires afin de partager de l'information régionale et appuyer les agences centrales et les sous-ministres dans la mise en œuvre des priorités du gouvernement du Canada de manière efficace et efficiente, tout comme le réseau des jeunes fonctionnaires. Prochaine diapo. Established in the 1980s, RFCs are housed within the regional development agencies and chaired by the RDA presidents. There are 6 RFCs representing each region across the country. The membership for each federal council is comprised of the highest ranking public servant of each department or agency operating in that region. These senior executives are delegated by their deputy heads to serve on the councils. RFCs are supported by small secretariats. And when I say small, I mean probably 2 people in most cases, sometimes 1. Who promote a collaborative approach to foster an integrated and engaged regional federal family. RFCs leverage vast regional talent to deliver impactful results. Examples include, as Josh just mentioned, the innovation fairs that were held pre-pandemic. The Quebec Federal Council, for example, has an innovation lab, and there are a multitude of other initiatives and activities undertaken by the RFCs, and often in collaboration with other networks such as FIN or the National Managers Community or others. And I'm seeing a spark of some other people that I might be in contact with to see what we can do together. Next slide, please. Les secrétariats des conseils fédéraux ont généralement, comme je l'ai mentionné, 2 personnes, un gestionnaire et un coordonnateur. Les secrétariats assument le rôle de secrétariat national par rotation. Alors, à tous les 2 ans, le secrétariat national est situé au sein d'un des conseils. Cette année, celui-là, c'est le Conseil fédéral du Nord, pour lequel je suis la gestionnaire, sous la présidence nationale de Paula Isaac, présidente de CanNor. Le greffier et le comité consultatif sur la gestion de la fonction publique déterminent les priorités nationales des conseils fédéraux régionaux, nous donnant ainsi nos grandes lignes directrices. Les conseils suivent et mettent en œuvre ces dernières d'une manière reflétant leurs différents contextes régionaux. Prochaine diapo. RFCs are trusted sources that explore solutions to shared challenges and help implement horizontal initiatives. We do this by gathering clear, high-level regional perspectives and insights, by delivering key messages to Federal Council members, regional communities, and decision makers, by bringing people from multiple sectors together to address regional challenges and opportunities that are common to all federal organizations in one or multiple regions, by promoting a collaborative and networked approach to help maintain a cohesive federal family. Next slide, please. Les 4 grandes priorités qui nous aident à établir nos plans d'action sont mises en œuvre d'une manière qui tient compte de la réalité régionale de chacun des conseils. Nos priorités présentement sont collaborer pour tirer profit des opportunités d'échange, de renseignements et de connaissances, permettre et faciliter l'innovation et l'expérimentation, soutenir les efforts horizontaux pour une main-d'œuvre solide, engagée et diversifiée, et fournir une plateforme pour le réseautage et la collaboration. De plus, des groupes de travail, y compris des groupes de travail provinciaux ou territoriaux, dirigés par les membres des différents conseils, peuvent être mis sur pied par le président du conseil dans le cadre du mandat, de leur mandat. Next slide. Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." This quote is a very real reflection of the wonders that can be accomplished when people take the time to connect, share, and innovate, and that is the everyday reality of the regional federal councils. If you would like to know more about the RFCs, Paul, my other RFC manager colleagues, and I would be happy to continue the conversation. We have a link on this page to fill out for a contact form, and someone will get back to you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your session.
Thank you so much. That was a very informative look at all the wonderful work happening in the region. For our last segment, we will look at some of the great work happening across the GC. First, we have the amazing and talented Natasha Cote-Khan from Flex GC. And just a gentle reminder, if you have any questions as the remainder of the sessions go on, please make use of the Q&A function in Zoom. Natasha, over to you.
Hi, thank you for that really nice introduction. So I'm Natasha Koti-Khan, and I'm here to present today about FlexGC. This is our community of practice. You'll see on the screen our logo, and we believe that flexibility can exist in our future of work. So we'll go to the next slide. I'm talking to you today on an intersectional cross of traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Attawandaronk, and Mississauga tribes. I am in London, Ontario, and I have been working from London for the Government of Canada for the most part of my GC career. I've worked for the government for 23 years. I can't believe it's been that long. And I've been working from London for 18 of those 23 years. You can find me on social media, and we have those links for you if you'd like to. I talk a lot about the future of work and things that are happening on our landscape right now. So join me in some of those discussions. What I do at FlexGC, I am one of the leaders leading this community of practice. My role is to gather intel across the Government of Canada, and then I help write and design all resources and tips and tricks and hacks that we can use in an all of government way. I also help come up with up-to-the-date initiatives to help inform what's next for us as a community of practice. So we'll move to the next slide. So who are we? So at FlexGC, we have kind of an interesting story. So story time. We started as an official thing in 2016, and we were housed inside of the Canada School of Public Service. So we weren't really a community of practice, we were an initiative. At the time, it was an avant-garde idea because flexibility in the way that we work wasn't really a thing. We were all in the office working 5 days a week, and flexibility didn't mean what it means now. When I joined the community of practice, it was in 2019. I was working at the Privy Council's office in the Beyond 2020 team of public service renewal, thinking about those philosophies, the agile, the equipped, and inclusive. At the exact same time, the school was thinking of releasing FlexGC as a thing because it wasn't really getting a lot of traction. If only they could see a year later when the pandemic started, right? They might have hung on to it. So the ADM that I was working for at the time said, you know, this might be a good thing to keep going because it aligns nicely with the Beyond 2020 philosophy. And, you know, there might be some relevance later. So I adopted it, and we, as a community of practice at that time, became our side of the desk kind of thing. That's how we continued running with it. So that's kind of how we became to be a community of practice. What we believe the future is flexible, and flexibility can look different for everybody, depending on where you are, what your work function is, what you're doing in your work communities, your mandate, your department. But flexibility can exist everywhere, and it can be different for everyone, but we believe that the future is flexible. We take pride in sharing our personal experiences to help amplify why we think that is, and we walk the talk. We take a human-centered approach to helping our colleagues across Canada identify and adapt the tools, practices, and mindsets that they need to succeed to work remotely or in a hybrid environment, however flexibility is in their environment. Our objectives are to curate and amplify our efforts across the Government of Canada to support others through partnerships and a number of other offerings that we do. And we conduct user research, and we share with other networks and organizations our data. So we're not an official network. We are a community of practice. We do this volunteer style on the side of our desk. And we do it because we want to make the transition to whatever flexibility and our new normal is easier by sharing our experiences and knowledge with others. So what do we offer? We offer learning sessions, one-on-ones, if it's a large group, because we're a small team and so our capacity is limited. So if it's a large group, we come out and talk to you. If not, we have some other resources that we've created, and we share those for you to take and do with your teams one-on-one. We offer team support and tips and tricks and resource sharing, but mostly we do a lot of writing and creating of resources and contents that's being shared across the government, even in our centers. Things like questionnaires, we have a handbook that we released. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So our two biggest initiatives right now are the Future Work Handbook and our user questionnaire. So I think we dig into those a little more into the next slide. So I'll just talk a little bit about them briefly, and then we'll move to the next slide. So the handbook is a user guide for employees that we put together, like a best hits resources, which I'll dig into in the next slide. And the user questionnaire is unfortunately now closed, but we do one every year. And we collect insights on what the future looks like to you, how you're working in your current environment, what changes are on the landscape, how are you feeling about those changes? And we try and get an all of government perspective. So we'll talk more about that in the next slide. So we released the first edition of our handbook this past April. It's available in both official languages on our website right now, and we'll share those links with you. What can you find in that handbook? There's different sections that reflect different realities and considerations. So we've divided up those sections by employees, leaders, and then we have a for everybody section. What do we talk about? We talk about culture, training, technology, best practices, mental health, how to have the talk with your manager, how to have the talk about what kind of working environment you're in, certain pandemic specific considerations that were existing before that still kind of can exist now, those life work balance things, you know, caring for kids, caring for family members while trying to manage work, all of those like weird dynamics that we've just all of a sudden adapted over the past 2 years that we're still kind of managing a little bit in a hybrid model. We offer a lot of helpful graphics on flexible work models, core hours, empathetic leadership, and other best practices that some departments have been using to help storytell some of the ways that they would like to be flexible. And we are updating the Future Work Handbook right now. It's an evergreen product. I am in the process of finalizing our edits. We hope to launch within the next month our updated Handbook 2.0. So stay tuned for that. So we'll share the link to our current handbook right now. Just know that it will be changing within the next month. So we'll flip to the next slide. So the handbook 2.0 that we originally did was, you'll see it online now if you go to it, but what we're going to be updating is we're going to update the language to the current posturing of hybrid and what it is right now. We're going to update existing sections to include things like telework toolkit, culture, and mental health in a hybrid sort of context. We're going to add new sections to reflect our reality, so networking in hybrid formats, change management, adaptation for transformation as we're all transforming again to a new working model, and change for leadership and re-onboarding, because really like we were at home for 2 years and we're going back into the office, and that's like an onboarding again, even if you worked in the office before. So re-onboarding is a new section we're going to talk about. And we're also going to talk about things that we missed last time, like accessibility, some inclusivity things that were shared with us from the general public who read our handbook and said, hey, you haven't included everything. So we invite you to look at our handbook, and if you feel that there's anything that you think we should add to it, feel free to reach out to us. We are writing this for you, so we want to make sure that we're including everything that we can. So we'll move to the next slide. So our user questionnaire that we just finished and closed had over 2,800 responses, so a pretty big response. It was all of government wide. We had 70 departments, and our results are coming within the next month as well. So the purpose was this to collect interdepartmental data, which currently is hard to get. I mean, we're all doing it within our own silos and reporting, but no one can really see like all of government sort of thinking and feeling for this change. So we collected that data. What do we plan on doing with that? We're analyzing it right now. It's a mountain of data. We will share the results on our social media and web platforms. We're also going to disaggregate the data and share with groups that we think can benefit with the information that we found. And we share any anonymous data with departments that specifically ask for it to help inform some of the things that they're doing. Our goal, there's power in knowing and bridging the gap across governments. by conducting this interdepartmental exercise. It helps gives us some power back to the employee by providing them with an opportunity to use their voice in the form of a survey to help influence and support change in a way that feels good for people. We just want to amplify experiences for the average Government of Canada employee. So we'll go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about last year's survey. Last year, when we were in the heart of the pandemic and the hybrid wasn't even a thing, desire for flexibility was strong. No one was looking to move or necessarily leave where they lived, but some were. And people just wanted the opportunity to work in a way that worked best for them. So we'll see if that's changed or if that's the same in the survey data that we're dissecting right now and going through. We'll share the links in the chat to our website if we haven't already. I can't see the chat, so that you can keep an eye on it and see when those updates are made. We will be announcing it on our social media. So that concludes my portion of the FlexGC presentation. Just to let you know that we have some resources that we'll be sharing online that we have in the chat right now that we have online, our GC Wiki collab and an article done by the Privy Council's office on us, as well as if anyone's looking to volunteer to join a community of practice like ours, you can do so by going to our website. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Natasha. I have long been a fan of the amazing work being done by FlexGC. I think it's really impressive that a grassroots network of employees was able to come together and support the modernization of the Government of Canada. So thank you for all your work. Next up, we have Iona, who is GC famous for saying, "I am not interested in preserving the status quo. I want to overthrow it." Iona is a super connector who has been engaging colleagues in Canada and across the world for years. Iona, over to you. Iona, we can't hear you. Okay, just a moment. I think we will be moving on over to our next speakers. Just give me a second here. Okay, so apologies for that. Our next speakers are the amazing Justine Reynolds and Emily Smith. They have spearheaded many initiatives in the GC, including GC mentorship. So welcome to Emily and to Justine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the warm introduction, saying that we're amazing. Very flattering. Happy to be here today. Excited to speak to you a bit about mentoring within the GC and our mentorship community of practice. I am Justine Reynolds. I currently work at Infrastructure Canada as the departmental liaison in the Deputy Minister's office. I've been long involved with YPNs across a couple of different departments and involved with the Federal Youth Network across my time in the GC. I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Emily, who leads and spearheads the mentorship community of practice with me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I actually just moved back to CBSA, which was the department I'd been at for the past 5 years. And I was previously the co-chair of the YPN there, the Next Generation Network, which is how I met Justine through the NCR YPN, and started my involvement in mentorship there and really took off and to develop this community with Justine.
Thanks, Emily. So we're going to speak to you. We'll try and fit in as much as we can in a short amount of time, but hope to make connections with all of you and talk more at a later time. We'll talk to you a bit about who we are, what we're all about, how we kind of came about and how our membership works, Emily's going to talk to you a little bit about pros and cons of mentoring regarding skills developments and all the benefits involved for mentors and mentees. We'll talk to you a bit about resources that we've created and gathered over time. And then we'll talk to you a little bit about some of the stuff we're involved with outside of the community practice and what we're looking forward to in the coming weeks and months. So what are we? Who are we? GC Mentorship Community Practice. What are we all about? GC Community Practice is a place for individuals, just like all of you, to connect with others working on mentoring files, to collaborate and share effective practices and common issues with mentoring programs across the GC. So really a central place for anyone who's interested in mentoring, anyone who has something on their agenda that they'd like to do with mentoring, get more involved with mentoring, to come share their experiences and learn from others. So a lot of what this community practice is us trying to support those who are involved in mentoring. So what we need to do to be successful is to find out what everyone else wants. So that's been a priority for us in the last little while, is really pinpointing what people are looking for so that we can really help them. So we also chair monthly meetings. Our next meeting is coming up this week. Emily will mention a bit about that after. So we have monthly meetings, third Thursday of every month, a variety of different topics. Sometimes it's more of a discussion focused meeting. Sometimes it's a presentation from other networks who are involved in mentoring. We've had many showcases of departmental networks who have had successful mentoring programs. So it's really, really helpful for them to come speak to us and tell us about how they ran their mentoring program and what worked well, what didn't work so well. A couple of things that we oversee and manage. We manage the GC Mentor GC group, the Living Library page, the EE Informal Networking and Mentorship platform, and the Facebook page. The Facebook page is called Unofficial Informal Mentoring Group. We'll make sure that all of the links are included for you. We have them all here. We'll make sure that they're included in the chat. We have a few resources to share. So all of the different groups and subgroups that we support, or different projects that we support, have the intent of facilitating cross-GC mentoring, amplifying initiatives, and offering a space for people to crowdsource mentoring requests and questions. We continue to augment the process for speed mentoring in person and online as part of career bootcamp, student-focused speed mentoring, and beyond. So that's another portion of what we do, speed mentoring. 2 more points on who we are and what we do. We also develop templates, baseline materials, and possibly working on it, fingers crossed, an internal application for mentoring programs to remove some of the common logistical burdens for other departments, other networks, other volunteer organizations that are working on similar feats. One thing we always give the caveat, it's important to mention that this group is not a replacement for Mentorship Plus. I'm sure many of you have heard of the successful initiative Mentorship Plus. We're not a replacement for that, and we're not seeking to find a one-size-fits-all approach, because that is definitely not possible with mentoring. There's so many different dynamics and considerations to take into account. So we're here to support mentoring across the GC as best as we can for anyone who's interested in mentoring, not specifically focusing on EE groups, although we do encourage that. We do support ARAN's work and the EE Informal Networking group, but that's not completely our focus. And we also do not focus specifically on executives. It's open to everyone. So I'll just talk a little bit more about our membership, and then I'll pass it over to Emily. So just to give you a bit of context of how it started, it was very grassroots and organic from some of us involved in the YPN. So as Emily and I mentioned, we were previous co-chairs for YPN, Young Professional Networks, in different departments, and we would come together for our regular YPN monthly meetings, and we realized there was a huge need for a group to come together to talk about mentoring. Many of us were doing work in our own departments. I was at DFO at the time, Emily was at CBSA, and we realized there's lots of work going on, not just amongst us two, but amongst many others involved, engaged members of the GC. We realized there's no central place for people to talk about mentoring. We don't have a common list of where you can find mentoring opportunities in the GC. We felt a bit lost with the organization of mentoring programs and mentoring opportunities across the GC. So we realized there was a really big need for this. Also, when you talk to young professionals, new public servants, anyone really engaged in YPN or the Federal Youth Network, one of the common things that they ask for most of the time when surveyed for their needs and what they're looking for is that they're looking for mentoring. So we realized obviously mentoring is a high demand within the public service. There's not really a central place for it. So let's create this group and try and solve one of the world problems. So the membership has been quite organic. We've attracted people over time through YPN, through FIN. We continue to develop and grow and improve. So for anyone here today who is not part of our membership, we would highly welcome you. You can see on the placemat that's on the screen how to join. And I'd also encourage you to shoot me an email indicating that you'd like to sign up and we can add you to the membership list. Being on the membership list basically entails coming to the monthly meeting or seeing our readouts, anything we share, initiatives, events going on within the GC in regards to mentoring. That's what you'd get out of being part of the membership, and also access to all of our resources and toolkits. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Emily, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about us. Over to you, Emily.
Yeah, so I'll just talk a bit about sort of the value of mentorship programming. And it's definitely a discussion that's come up in our community of practice, which draws in people that already know and value mentoring programs. But it comes up quite a bit on how do you sort of sell it and what are the benefits. And especially, I think a lot of folks tend to look at having very high level executives as mentors, and these are folks who usually have very busy schedules and not a lot of time, and there's not as many of them. But I really want to stress that your classification or level doesn't necessarily preclude you from being a mentor. And apologies, I just got a note that my internet is unstable, so hopefully it bears with me, but if not, let me know. But definitely sorry, I'm very distracted by the chat. It's something that is a value add to anyone in any agency across the GC. And definitely we strive to encourage non-executives to be mentors. As Justine mentioned, we have some of our informal networks that we'll get into a bit later. But really the benefit for the mentor, regardless of sort of what level they are, how far they are in their career, is that it brings together people who might not have come together in any other organic way, especially as we move into a hybrid workspace. You might not have those chance encounters in person. Working through a mentorship program with the kind of programming side, trying to match up profiles or applications or whoever, really gives both mentor and mentee a chance to meet someone they don't necessarily come across with, which just means that they can gain new perspectives and insights. So for mentees who might be earlier in their career, it's a great insight into kind of more working level, I guess, sort of issues or challenges or perspectives that a mentor who's maybe a bit more senior just might have become more removed from. And I think as things have changed a lot in the past few years, there's even more value in sharing those kind of experiences and perspectives. And for mentees, it's getting that insight of sometimes things don't make a lot of sense, or you're unsure of, there's some questions that necessarily aren't answered online, or there can be a lot of bias. So a mentor really helps to give, I think, a perspective and an opinion, obviously, on something that can be asked a bit more informally and not necessarily in the context of a big town hall meeting. But a mentor-mentee, it's a relationship, it's a dynamic with trust and respect. So it may take a bit to find someone that you can have a good mentorship relationship with, but definitely once you've got that person, it's really invaluable, kind of the insights that you share between one another, the information you gain and the benefits that come with that. And definitely I would also add, behind the scenes, working in mentorship programming is just another great skill building opportunity. Justine and I, as we mentioned, started in the Young Professionals Network, and we've definitely noticed there's a split. So either mentoring programs are managed by YPNs or they're inside HR functions. But there's a lot of work involved, and sometimes people underestimate how much it's required to set up kind of a robust program, especially if you've got more considerations on how you want to do your matching. So definitely there's skills to be learned from the programming coordinating perspective as well, as far as how to manage all these applications, how to stay in communication, how to do outreach, how to sell a program, how to make sure that folks are engaged, how to manage risks, or if you get, feedback. So there's really a lot of benefit from everyone involved in mentorship, not just mentors and mentees. And I think with our community of practice, we're hoping to mainly help out the folks who are getting involved in programming, especially again, if it's in a YPN, sometimes it's done side of desk. But even we found folks that work in HR mentoring programs, there's just a lot of information out there and wasn't really a space to share it all. So with this, we're able to sort of share lessons learned and help others avoid pitfalls or challenges that we've experienced to try and make it a worthwhile experience for everyone who's involved, because it definitely can be a challenge to run it behind the scenes when you've never done it before. So that's really what we try to do with our community of practice, is just sharing all of that insight and information that not necessarily comes from Justine and I, but comes from everyone that we're able to bring together who see the value and have an interest in mentoring, and then can even help those looking to establish programs help build their own sort of business cases and examples for why departments or functional communities could invest in a mentorship program sort of specific to them. So I think I'll pass it back to Justine now. And I'm not sure how we're doing for time. I'm a bit off schedule.
All good. We'll try and keep it concise. I just wanted to mention, thanks, Emily, you covered a lot of great ground there. Wanted to mention something else that we're involved in as part of the community practice is speed mentoring. That's a big portion of how we started. We got involved with speed mentoring events around town and career boot camp speed mentoring and student speed mentoring. So although that's not obviously the only focus, it's a big part about what we do and the resources that we're able to support and who we're able to support. So like I mentioned, career boot camp is a big part of that, the speed mentoring piece. There's an annual career boot camp, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. And we've supported the speed mentoring series of the career boot camp for the last couple of years. I think it's 2 years now. So always super fun. You'll hardly ever get a manager or a senior executive or even senior analyst that says no to speed mentoring. Everyone loves it. There's always huge demand for that. So we love being involved in that. And what we've been able to do through the community of practice is develop a toolkit, a speed mentoring toolkit. Ali actually alluded to it before. We have a toolkit specifically for speed mentoring. So we have comms materials, social media suggestions, databases for keeping the mentors and mentees matched, so on and so forth. So it's really intended to be, I can pick this up, look at it, and organize it within my department or within my network. So we hope that that's useful. We've heard good comments and reviews so far that it has been quite helpful. Although we don't necessarily have the capacity to do all the organizing between Emily and I ourselves. Our goal is to help people as much as we can and to give them the resources they need to organize speed mentoring within their department or network. Speed mentoring, although it's not long-term mentoring, there's tons of benefits to it, and it often spearheads into a long-term mentoring program. So we've seen some departments who have used it as the spearhead, as the catalyst to start a larger mentoring program, and really to build their database of mentees and mentors, which is great. So it's a suggestion for us, if you're looking to start a mentoring program, start small with a speed mentoring event, a series of speed mentoring events, and it'll spearhead from there. So just wanted to share the work we do surrounding speed mentoring events. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of you on your speed mentoring events and sharing lessons learned and feedback as we can. Emily, did you want to talk a bit about resources at this point?
I'll just wrap up very quickly because I think we've definitely gone over time. But just to reiterate what Justine said, so we do also manage kind of self-directed interdepartmental mentoring programs. So we'll drop the links in the chat, but there's the Living Library, the EE informal networking program, and the Facebook group. And those are really self-directed, self-guided. So in the event that your department doesn't have a mentoring program, we definitely work to provide a space for folks to still become mentors or to seek out mentors, and it's all self-directed. So if you want to be a mentor, sign up and identify what you can speak to. And if you are looking for someone to mentor you, especially someone outside of your department, or maybe you're in the regions and just have a hard time reaching out to folks even within your own department, feel free to check those out. We'll be sure to drop the links in the chat. And as well, just a reminder, we do have a community practice meeting this Thursday. The communications team is actually presenting, and they run a very large and successful interdepartmental mentoring program for their functional community. So definitely a lot to be learned there if you are interested. And I will wrap up because I think we're at time.
That's great. Thanks, Emily. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Emily and Justine. That was a great presentation. And thank you to all of our presenters. We're now going to move over to the Q&A portion of the summit. I'm going to go over some questions in the Q&A function. I'll start with the first question, and I think this could be addressed by any of our panelists, really. So if you have a response, please feel free to just chime in. So the first question, how do you manage access to social media accounts when there are multiple network executives / chairs?
I can answer that.
Sure.
In our community of practice, we've allocated ourselves roles, we've given ourselves positions. So we have comms team. We operate very similarly to if we were like a real office, even though it's a community of practice. It just helps keep roles and responsibilities like tight. So we have our comms people suggest our response. We have a review team that reviews it and makes sure that what we're saying is accurate and not in conflict of interest. And then we pull the trigger to post. So we do have our notifications on for those people to be able to respond in a timely manner. And that's how we do it. Simple.
That's awesome. Thanks, Natasha.
Maybe I'll just add to that, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Just from an official languages perspective as well, like as you're building out your team, certainly think through, no matter what your community or your network is doing, that you're posting information in both official languages, sort of no matter the grassroots of it, from a perspective of inclusion, it's certainly best to make sure that you are posting in English and in French, or posting, bilingual messages to any social media platforms. And this would tie in nicely, if you don't have that capability right now, to look for a micro mission for somebody who could help you out with that capability. But definitely good to keep that in mind when you're thinking about managing social media accounts.
Thanks, Josh. Before we move over to the next question, do any of our panelists want to take a stab at this too? If not, we can jump over to the next one. Okay. So the next question is geared towards Natasha. You're popular today.
I know it would be. The subject matter that's current, so.
Yes. So Natasha, I would be interested in knowing more about having flexible office spaces in the future as options for Government of Canada employees. Do you think that we will be getting access to a generic office building in order to work collaboratively instead of each department having their own space to work? That's a good question. For example, one office space that DFO, CRA, etc. can book and work from instead of a separate building only for DFO employees or CRA employees.
So that is exactly what GC co-working is. And I don't know if you know about that, but you can find them on GCpedia. I'll try and find the links and throw it in the chat. And I believe that they also are probably posted within your department on your intranet. In your Q&A section, they'll likely have something about GC co-working, especially with your hybrid approach becoming like the new norm. They've updated all their Q&As to include things like that. So the answer is yes, there are GC co-working spaces and they're listed on their website. There is a process on how to sign up. You do it through your department. Your security is validated. Headshot needs to be sent. You need to have your manager sign it, and then you get access to the closest GC co-working space that's near you. There's not like a ton of options for GC co-working space, but GC co-working is run by Public Service and Procurement Canada, and they are procuring, I believe, 5 more locations in 2023, and they have 15 more on the horizon for the next like 5-year out. So GC co-work spaces are here to stay. They're looking at options, and that gives us in the regions, because I'm a regional employee, some options to be able to try hybrid.
That's awesome. Thank you. Anyone else of our panelists want to add to that? Have anything they would like to add? No? Okay, we'll move over to our next question. So much great work. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for that response. So much great work is being done by informal networks in a shared leadership model with minimal permission seeking and a whole lot of intrinsic commitment. How might the leadership approach in these networks be applied in formal teams to unleash similar potentials? What do the folks in these networks wish the executives would learn about this approach to collaborative leadership? So I'll open that up to our panelists.
Maybe I'll start with this one, and then hopefully some of our other folks can join in. But I think what we're seeing is that the informal networks and the grassroots networks are really able to adapt and to be able to respond to things in a much more immediate fashion. We saw that with the Anti-Racism Ambassadors Network. We saw that with, and it doesn't mean that the structures of old are necessarily disappearing, but it means that the structures of old kind of need to modernize. Because if we were going through 7 layers of approval for everything, we wouldn't be able to respond to the challenges that are going to happen, today, tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. And I think that's part of it, is that, we need to be able to respond more quickly. We need to be able to adapt more quickly. And I think, part of what was mentioned in the question really is that intrinsic commitment. So I guess the question is, for senior leaders and really leaders at all levels, is like, in your team, do you have that intrinsic commitment or not? If you don't have that commitment, you don't have that trust, are you able to leverage the same things that grassroots networks do? Or are you able to build that kind of intrinsic commitment and trust? I spent a lot of my time in regional leadership roles, and a lot of the time the challenges were that people felt disconnected in their sort of day-to-day jobs from the work that they were doing. They didn't see the results. They didn't see how answering a phone for ESDC or CRA led to any sort of outcome. So they didn't feel that kind of commitment to that role. So I think there's part of a role for senior leadership to really make that connection, but also to incorporate some of the things that we talked about in day-to-day management of teams. Micro-missions are a great way to expand your skill set, but you should be able to express that to your manager and say, I don't work in comms, but I'd like to get some experience working in a communications function, or job shadowing somebody who works on social media within the department, or finding those kind of opportunities. So I think it's a mindset within the leadership to be able to sort of adapt and figure out what's the leader of the sort of post-pandemic or pandemic era versus what's the 2019 leader that we were looking for.
Absolutely. I'll just add to it. Just working in that leadership space, like in my department, I can see that the leadership is adopting an open approach now and using some of the mindsets of what we're doing in our community of practice, this all of government approach. There are interdepartmental committees, there's emails and relationships being built and shared across departments, which is really nice because we used to be very siloed before, but working horizontally has so much more benefit. Like you said, Josh, it touches on that culture and collaboration and relationship building. And I think that piece, you can see that change happening in government now. Myself, when I'm working for a leader, I choose a leader that's like that on purpose. And it's getting easier and easier to find them now because, the mindset change is happening. So, I would say that the leveraging of what we're doing in our community of practice has already begun.
those were some really great points made. Do any one of our panelists have anything to add before we move over to our next question?
I'll jump in. I just want to echo what Josh and Natasha have already said. I think it's hugely important for for formal teams to kind of consider the approaches that these networks have taken already. They break down silos. They increase collaboration with each other. They're not reinventing the wheel. They're working with colleagues from across the federal public service. And I think that's something that the formal departments and agencies can look to adopt in their own workplaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Okay, so if no one has anything else to add to that, we'll move on to our next question. And that is geared towards Sean and Neha. So your podcasts are so fun and engaging. What advice do you have for folks who want to host their own podcast?
Hi, I guess I could take that. Hello. Advice for people who want to host their own podcast. I would say don't think about it too hard. The best conversations that I've had with people are the ones that sort of flow naturally. Sometimes we didn't even have specific things we wanted to talk about, but people want to listen to the things that you are interested, because more often than not, if you're interested in hearing it, then other people will also be interested in hearing it. So I think that would be kind of my major, just general advice to people. And because it's podcast, there's no need, well, there's not a huge need to sort of not censor yourself, but do your best to bring your authentic self into it. People love to hear your personality. We're not listening to a podcast because it's another webinar or an event series or something like that. We want to hear what people sound like in their daily life, what they think about, what their anxieties are, their concerns, their things that they're excited about. So just bring yourself.
I like that, yourself. Thanks, Neha. Our next question is for our folks over at GC Exchange, Tamara and Vincent. When do you think all departments will have a presence on GC Exchange? How can we help support its growth?
Great question. Thank you very much for it. There is no set timeline right now for the onboarding of, like, there's just so many agencies that need to interact with government workers that it's kind of hard to say, like, when. Right now we are just supporting an open enrollment into GC Exchange. So go to the website, sign up for GC Exchange, and we'll endeavor to serve everybody. If there's any problems, we're here to help out with that. And as for departments that are a little bit more problematic, we know about them. We want to be notified about them. Please feel free to contact us. And what we do is we liaise with those agencies, those departments, and set out an action plan, because we have to set up security and other protocols put in place. And that does take time. So even with, especially the larger the agency, sometimes the more difficult it is. A good rule of thumb is that if they already have an MS Teams environment that they're working in, usually that makes things easier for us, because we use the same Azure identity and cloud security features to join you to GC Exchange. So in brief, we know that by the end of fiscal, we're going to have the ones that are signatories to the MOU for GC Exchange all onboarded, but we just don't have, like, for the people who might be on the edges of between government agencies and being crown corporations and all that other stuff. It's a work in progress. However, please do contact us, and the sooner we're notified about the willingness to onboard, the sooner we can get the wheels turning. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Vincent. Okay, so we just have a couple more questions left. The next question is for Jacqueline, although I think she might have hopped off. So Paul, if you can, how can interdepartmental networks support the work of the RFCs?
Yeah, so just so people know who I am, because you haven't seen me all day, I'm a policy analyst at the Regional Federal Council National Secretariat, stepping in for Jacqueline, who had to leave, unfortunately. So how can interdepartmental networks support the mission of RFCs? I think that ultimately, they're basically born out of a necessity to address issues within the government of Canada. And our goal as RFCs ultimately is to ensure that we're a strong, diverse, and engaged, federal family. And so what we do when we see these great initiatives that basically are created, what we do is basically spread the word within our networks in the regions. Different ways that we can do that. Ali touched on this earlier, either spreading them through our various comms products. Each federal council has their own way of communicating. So some councils will have newsletters, others will leverage GC tools. But basically, either we'll use those more horizontal communications to share the word, or trickle those messages from top down. So if the mission and if the messages align with that pan-Canadian vision for again, strong, diverse, engaged public service, then we will definitely be wanting to share them.
Thank you, Paul, and good to see you again. We interviewed Paul and his colleague Catherine for an article on our platform, Living Digital, and they do some really cool work at the RFC, so be sure to check them out. We have just one last question for Emily and Justine. Should all departments and agencies support mentorship initiatives, and if so, why?
Sorry, a bit of delay getting on there. Good question. My answer is yes, for sure. There's tons of benefits to mentoring, either being a mentor or a mentee. Emily alluded to some of them before. And as I mentioned, one of the main asks that we have from young public servants, from new public servants, is that they'd like to see mentoring. So there's definitely a need for it based on surveys that are done, based on just asking people what they're looking for in their experience in the public service. There's a very high demand for it. So for departments or networks to offer this would be great, and it would be helping people to really get what they're looking for out of their job, and to get what they're looking for, and to help them further their career in the public service. So that being said, there's obviously very different and unique needs depending on the departments. We saw that quite a bit with different workforce populations. Like Emily worked at CBSA, I worked at DFO and Coast Guard for a bit. So Coast Guard and CBSA are very on-site, different than what some of us see day to day. They're working on ships or working at the border, very different day-to-day lifestyles. So all the unique considerations for different departments, different populations need to be taken into account when organizing a mentoring program. So definitely a challenge to organize a program that works well for everyone, but 100% there is great value in having such a program.
Yeah, and I think I'll just quickly add on to what Justine said, that I think all departments should support mentoring, but that doesn't have to look the same in every department. So if there is, struggle to develop capacity to run a program within the department, even just supporting employees who say want to put it on their learning plan to take the initiative and show the agency to reach out to a mentor themselves without necessarily a departmental program, I think there's a lot of opportunity for managers and leaders to support that kind of initiative as well, in the event that there isn't kind of a formal mentoring program in place. And even that could extend to using, again, something like the Living Library. But I think definitely supporting folks who want to either seek out that mentorship or mentor other employees is something that'll really only benefit the GC, as that's part of breaking down silos and building relationships and networking, which I think today we can all agree networking is very important. We're all from different networks, and building those relationships is usually very positive for anyone involved in a mentorship program. So while I understand there's always time considerations and constraints, I think if we're interested in kind of supporting employees develop as individuals and thinking even long-term career, that there's a lot of benefit to engaging in a mentoring relationship that departments should be encouraging or supporting. Yeah, that's all I think I had to add.
Thank you, Emily and Justine. I will just ask if any of our panelists have anything final to add before we wrap things up in the Q&A to any of the points made earlier. Okay, actually, I think we have a hand up. Vincent?
Yeah, I just wanted to just emphasize that the GC Exchange team, we offer the platform, but it's left up to users to use it as they want to. I highly encourage you to use the tool and let us know how you're using it and if it's fitting the bill for you. It's in a constant state of iteration, and we are more than happy to take the tool where the users are. So, switching to French, si vous utilisez l'outil et vous trouvez que GC Échange, c'est une plateforme qui vous convient, mais il y a des choses que vous souhaitez avoir, contactez-nous et laissez-nous savoir où vous voulez l'outil, où ça gère pour vous et vos besoins. So, just a final thought. Use the tools, increase the networking. Please let us know. Contact us via any medium, even on GC Exchange, and chat us up anytime. Thank you. Thank you once again for this platform. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Vincent. And thanks to all our panelists. I'm now going to pass it over to Josh for some closing remarks. But before I go, I would like to give a quick shout out to Taran Shapransky from ESDC for her behind the scenes support of this event. And I would also like to shout out to Oliver, Haley, and Alexa from the Fin production team. So thanks, everyone. It was great, engaging and speaking with all of you today. And I'm sure I'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Ella, for your excellent moderation today. Very much appreciated. Merci beaucoup à Ella pour les modérations superbes aujourd'hui pour le sommet. So thanks, everyone. This marks the end of the GC Network Summit, but thank you all for coming today, for bringing your questions, for participating actively in each of the topics, and participating in the Q&A and the chat. And hopefully, this is giving you some ideas to start with. We will be sharing all of the resources that were presented today on our GC Wiki page, and make use of those resources, and reach out if you have questions. But really, we're here to support you, and hopefully, with this summit, it provided your networks with some support, some ideas, and some next steps of things to work on. Alors, merci beaucoup à vous tous pour participer activement aujourd'hui dans le sommet. Et puis, tous les ressources vont être en ligne sur la page wiki. Next up for the Federal Youth Network, we have next week the third session in our Diversity Inclusion series for October, on October 25th, which is evidence-based ways to impact diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. The registration for that is on our GC Wiki page as well. That is October 25th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to be a fascinating discussion with Etienne Laliberté, who's a free agent and has done a lot of work in this area. So very much looking forward to that. And then on November 1st, we're starting our GC 101 series, which will be sort of quick hit sessions on topics that you may or may not be familiar with. So some of the things that are best covered in kind of a short format, stuff like ATIP, procurement, and a number of different topics from November 1st until mid-December. So please join us for that series. Alors, merci tout le monde. Et puis, vous avez 35 minutes de surplus, mais merci pour nous joindre aujourd'hui, de participer et d'être un partie de cet événement. So have a great day, everyone. Thanks very much. Thank you.